Welcome to our deep dive, you guys, into the early American Republic.
Yeah.
We're going to be really looking at some excerpts from the American Yawp, which is this super cool online history textbook. It's collaboratively written.
It really is a fantastic resource for just diving into this period.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
We're going to be focusing on excerpts that look at some key themes.
Okay.
How the concept of American citizenship was evolving and who was included and excluded.
Right.
How various groups challenged the existing power structures.
Yeah.
And then also how the ideals of equality kind of clash with the realities of power.
Yeah, those are themes that resonate throughout American history, even today.
Totally. And get ready for some surprises along the way.
Ooh, I love surprises.
Did you know that Thomas Jefferson,
Thomas Jefferson.
yes, that Thomas Jefferson had his views on race challenged by a brilliant black surveyor
I did not know that.
named Benjamin Banneker?
Okay.
We're also going to look at how Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase, while it was a huge land deal for the U.S., was also a bit of a constitutional gamble on his part.
Very interesting.
Okay, so let's set the scene.
Okay.
The early republic, roughly 1783 to 1830, was a time of huge change.
Right.
It's like the nation was trying to figure out what it meant to be American
Exactly.
after winning independence.
And who got to be a part of that definition, which was a central question
Got
with
that.
some far-reaching implications.
It was a period of shifting power dynamics,
Yeah.
changing social norms,
Totally.
and various groups demanding to be heard.
Of course.
And one of the first big shifts was the move from federalist control
Okay.
to the rise of the Democratic Republic.
Gotcha.
Jefferson's election in 1800 was seen as this victory for the common man.
Although it's important to note that common man still refers to white men who owned property.
Right, very true. A reminder of the limitations of the time.
Right.
But even with those limitations, it was a significant shift in power.
Yes.
The elites were pretty worried about what they called mob rule.
Oh, yeah. There was real anxiety among those in power that this move towards greater democracy would lead to chaos and instability.
Oh, totally.
This debate over who was fit to lead and who had the right to participate in government really shaped the early republic.
It's fascinating how these concerns about power and democracy still resonate today.
For sure.
But let's dive into a specific example of how the existing order was being challenged.
Okay.
The fight against slavery by Black Americans.
Absolutely. This is where things get especially interesting.
Yeah?
Gabriel's Rebellion in 1800,
Okay.
although it ultimately failed, demonstrated the lengths to which enslaved people were willing to go to achieve freedom.
Imagine this, 1,000 enslaved men planning to take Richmond, Virginia.
Wow.
They were going to set fires, seize weapons, even capture the governor.
The level of planning and organization involved really challenged the racist assumptions about Black people's capabilities that were prevalent at the time.
Right.
These are individuals capable of complex strategic thinking, willing to risk everything for their freedom.
It really shatters the image of the passive, submissive, enslaved person
Yeah,
and shows them as active agents fighting for their liberation.
absolutely.
And speaking of inspiring fights for freedom,
Yes.
we can't forget the impact of the Haitian Revolution, which had been raging since 1791.
Right.
It terrified white Americans.
Of course.
But for Black Americans, it was a beacon of hope.
It provided tangible proof that Black liberation was possible.
Totally.
Think about it, a successful slave revolt leading to the establishment of a Black republic
Wow.
sent shockwaves across the Atlantic.
And you can see its impact in the writings of David Walker,
Yeah.
who's a Black abolitionist,
Yeah.
who in 1829 published his powerful appeal.
Powerful.
He called Haiti the glory of the Blacks and terror of the tyrants.
He urged Black Americans to draw strength from the Haitian example, using it as a model for their own fight for freedom and equality.
It's incredible how Haiti became such a potent symbol in the struggle for Black liberation in the U.S.
Of course, there was backlash. White Americans, fearing the implications of a successful Black republic, doubled down on their efforts to reinforce white supremacy.
Of course.
We see this in the rise of racist propaganda,
Yeah.
such as the Bobolition broadsides.
Oh, yeah.
These were crude caricatures aimed at dehumanizing Black people and mocking their aspirations.
It's heartbreaking how fear and prejudice fueled such blatant attempts to suppress any form of Black empowerment.
It really is.
And all of this was happening at a time when the understanding of race itself was undergoing a major transformation.
The Enlightenment ideal of a shared humanity was giving way to attempts to scientifically classify races and justify hierarchies.
Scientists like Linnaeus Buffon and Blumenbach
Yeah.
were developing theories that linked race to physical characteristics and geographical origins.
Right.
They claimed that different environments shaped racial groups, leading to some being inherently more civilized than others.
It's astonishing how they try to disguise racism as science. It's a classic example of how scientific ideas can be distorted and manipulated to serve political and social agendas.
And within this context, there's the fascinating case of Henry Moss,
Oh, yeah.
an enslaved man who began turning white.
It's such a strange story that really captures the complex and often contradictory thinking about race at the time.
Right.
Initially, Moss's transformation was seen as evidence that a better environment could uplift supposedly inferior races.
Okay.
He became a sensation, a living embodiment of this debate about race and the potential for change.
I can only imagine the frenzy his case caused.
But as time went on, Moss's story became entangled with those emerging theories of Black inferiority,
Right.
highlighting how deeply entrenched these ideas about race were becoming.
It's a stark reminder that even seemingly positive examples could be twisted to fit existing prejudices.
Unfortunately true.
And then there's the clash between Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Banneker over the issue of race.
This is where the contradictions within Jefferson's own thinking become so apparent.
He championed liberty and natural rights,
Yes.
but also clung to deeply racist beliefs.
He was a proponent of polygenesis,
Polygenesis.
the idea that different races had separate origins.
He used this to justify sending freed Black people back to Africa, arguing that Black people and white people were inherently too different to ever coexist peacefully in America.
It's a chilling reminder that even the most enlightened thinkers of the time could hold such prejudiced views.
And Banneker, in response, wrote this incredible letter to Jefferson, dismantling his absurd and false ideas.
Banneker's letter is a powerful indictment of hypocrisy and a testament to his intellect and courage.
It's a moment where the ideals of the American Revolution are truly put to the test and sadly fall short.
It makes it clear that the fight for true equality was far from over.
But it wasn't just Black Americans challenging the status quo during this time.
No, it wasn't.
Women were also seeking a larger role in the new republic,
Of course.
even if that role came with certain limitations.
This is where we encounter the intriguing concept of Republican motherhood.
So Republican motherhood,
Yeah.
what exactly did that mean?
Essentially, it was the idea that women played a crucial role in the success of the Republic.
Okay.
But that role was very specific.
Okay.
They were the mothers of future citizens responsible for instilling in their children the virtues and values that would sustain the nation.
So they were shaping the future of the republic,
Mm-hmm.
but from within their homes. It
Exactly.
was a powerful role in a way,
It was.
but also very restrictive.
Very.
It recognized the influence of women, but kept them confined to the domestic sphere.
It's a classic example of progress and limitation happening at the same time.
Yeah, it's like saying, you're important, but stay in your lane.
Exactly. And we even see examples of how this idea played out in the political discourse of the time.
Right.
Some Democratic Republicans believed that women should only marry real Republicans.
Wow, talk about pressure. You're not just choosing a life partner, you're making a political statement.
Right.
But now let's shift our focus to the man who kind of embodies this era of change and contradiction. Thomas Jefferson and his presidency.
Jefferson is a truly complex figure.
He came into office with this vision of limited government and an agrarian republic.
Yes, he wanted to reduce taxes, shrink the national debt, and scale back the military.
It was all about empowering the yeoman farmer and minimizing federal power,
But his actions didn't always align perfectly with that vision.
like the Louisiana Purchase.
Exactly. The Louisiana Purchase was this massive land grab that actually contradicted Jefferson's own strict interpretation of the Constitution.
He believed in limited federal powers, but when the opportunity arose to double the size of the nation, he went for it.
He did.
He basically said, well, the Constitution doesn't explicitly say I can't do this, so I'm going for it.
It really makes you think about the balance between pragmatism and principles in politics.
Totally.
It also shows how the allure of westward expansion was already a powerful force in American thinking.
But things weren't always smooth sailing for Jefferson.
Not at all.
His Embargo Act of 1807, his attempt to avoid war with Britain, backfired spectacularly.
He thought he could use economic pressure,
Okay.
or peaceable coercion, as he called it, to force Britain and France to respect American neutrality.
But it didn't work.
It did not, it devastated the American economy and led to accusations of tyranny from his opponents.
It's a good reminder that even the best intentions can have unintended consequences.
Especially when it comes to international relations.
And amidst all of this, we can't forget the ongoing struggles of Native Americans during this time.
Right. They were navigating an incredibly complex political landscape, trying to maintain their sovereignty and land while facing pressure from all sides.
They are masters of realpolitik, playing the different powers, the U.S., Britain, Spain, even other native nations, against each other in order to survive.
And when diplomacy failed, as it often did,
Uh-huh.
violence erupted.
The Shawnee leader, Tecumseh, and his brother Tenskwatawa, also known as the Prophet, emerged during this time with a powerful vision for native resistance.
They envisioned a pan-Indian confederacy, a united front to resist American expansion. It was a bold and ambitious plan.
Inspired in part by earlier resistance movements like Pontiac's War in the 1760s.
Pontiac's War, fueled by the teachings of the Delaware prophet Neolin, had shown the potential of intertribal unity against colonial powers.
Yeah.
Neolin had called for a rejection of European influence and a return to native traditions and spirituality.
He argued that only by uniting could native nations push back against the encroachment on their lands and cultures.
It was a powerful message that resonated with many.
But ultimately, both Pontiac and Tecumseh faced the same obstacle.
Division within native communities.
Not all tribes or leaders agreed on the best way to deal with the expanding United States.
Right, some favored accommodation, while others saw armed resistance as the only path forward.
These internal divisions made it very difficult to create a truly united front against a common enemy.
And sadly, Tecumseh's efforts, like Pontiac's before him, ultimately ended in defeat.
The Red Stick Creek War in the Southeast is a prime example.
Inspired by Tecumseh's vision, the Red Sticks took up arms against the U.S., but they were isolated and outnumbered.
Their defeat at the Battle of Horseshoe Bend led to massive land cessions, further weakening Native American power in the region.
It's a tragic reminder of how disunity and the overwhelming force of American expansion proved to be insurmountable obstacles for even the most visionary Native leaders.
And speaking of conflict, the War of 1812 further entangled the U.S. in these complex relationships with Native nations.
This war, often seen as a second war of independence, was fueled by two main issues.
Okay.
The British practice of impressment, where they were forcing American sailors into their navy,
Right.
and British support for Native American resistance on the frontier.
So on one hand, you have this maritime conflict over trade and sailors' rights.
Yes.
And on the other hand, you have this land conflict fueled by westward expansion and Native American resistance.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that the British saw Native Americans as valuable allies in their fight against the U.S., providing them with arms and supplies in the hope of checking American expansion.
And back in Congress, you had the War Hawks.
Oh, yes.
These young, ambitious politicians like Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, who were eager to prove American strength and secure national honor.
They saw the war as an opportunity to finally break free from British influence and assert American dominance in North America.
It was a war with multiple fronts. The Atlantic Theater, where the fledgling U.S. Navy scored some surprising victories against the mighty British fleet.
Right.
The Canadian Great Lakes Theater, where Tecumseh and his allies fought alongside the British and the Southern Theater, culminating in Andrew Jackson's stunning victory at the Battle of New Orleans.
It's remarkable how these moments of heroism and resilience from the War of 1812 have become ingrained in our national memory.
Think of Captain James Lawrence's famous last words on the USS Chesapeake, "Don't give up the ship."
Or the USS Constitution earning the nickname Old Ironsides because its hull was so tough it seemed impenetrable.
And of course, there's the story of Francis Scott Key being inspired to write The Star-Spangled Banner while witnessing the bombardment of Fort McHenry.
But amidst all the patriotic fervor surrounding the war, there was also deep division within the country.
The Hartford Convention of 1814, where New England Federalists gathered to air their grievances, shows just how fractured the nation was.
These Federalists, largely opposed to the war and feeling marginalized by the Democratic Republicans, even considered the idea of secession.
Can you imagine the nation was barely a generation old and already facing the threat of splitting apart?
It highlights the intense regional and political tensions of the era.
In the end, the War of 1812 ended in a stalemate, but it had a profound impact on American identity.
It fostered a stronger sense of national unity and pride.
Albert Gallatin, the former Treasury Secretary, observed that Americans felt more American after the war.
It's as if they had gone through this trial by fire and emerged stronger, more confident in themselves as a nation.
And this newfound confidence gave rise to the American system.
Championed by Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun.
They wanted to make the U.S. economically independent through tariffs, to protect American industries, infrastructure projects like roads and canals, to improve transportation, and a national bank to stabilize the economy.
It was all about strengthening the nation from within.
And on the international stage, we see the Monroe Doctrine of 1823, a bold declaration of American dominance in the Western Hemisphere.
It warned European powers against any further colonization in the Americas.
It was essentially saying this is our turf stay out.
It's incredible to see how far the young republic had come in such a short time, from struggling for survival to asserting its power on the world stage.
It's a real testament to the ambition and growing confidence of this new nation.
Absolutely. It also kind of foreshadows those like expansionist impulses
Right.
that would shape American foreign policy for decades to come.
Yeah, it's like the seeds of manifest destiny were already planted
Totally.
during this era.
Mm-hmm.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the early republic, what would you say are the key takeaways from all of this? What really stands out to you from the American Yawp?
I think one of the biggest things that jumps out is just how this period was all about defining what it meant to be American.
Right.
But at the same time, there was this intense conflict over who got included in that definition.
Yeah, we saw how various groups, Black Americans, women, Native Americans, they were all pushing back against the existing power structures,
Yeah.
demanding a greater voice and a role in shaping the nation.
Yeah, it wasn't just about who was considered American, but what that meant in terms of rights and opportunities.
Right.
And the young nation itself was grappling with how to live up to its ideals of liberty and equality while simultaneously expanding its territory and power. And often this expansion came at the expense of those very groups who were fighting for inclusion.
Those contradictions, those tensions between ideals and realities make this period so fascinating, so relevant for understanding America today.
It's tempting to romanticize the early republic as some sort of golden age.
Right.
But the reality was much more complex.
Yeah.
Issues of race, slavery, westward expansion, these were deeply divisive then, and their legacies continue to shape the American experience today.
It's like the early republic laid the groundwork, both the good and the bad, for the nation we live in now.
Exactly.
And as you continue to explore this era, I encourage you to think about those legacies, those echoes of the past that resonate in the present. How do those early struggles for inclusion, equality, and power play out in today's America?
Yeah, it's a question really worth pondering. And I think, this deep dive into the American Yawp has given us the tools to start unpacking those connections.
Absolutely. We've seen how the early republic, for all its triumphs and aspirations, was also a time of immense challenges and contradictions.
For sure.
It was a period where, the very definition of American was being fiercely debated and contested.
Absolutely.
We've explored the struggles of those who were excluded from that definition. Black Americans fighting for their freedom, women seeking a greater role in society, Native Americans defending their lands and sovereignty, and we've seen how the nation grappled with its own identity and its place on the world stage.
And we've seen how those legacies of this era, the ideals and the compromises, the triumphs and the tragedies continue to shape America today.
So as you continue to learn about this period, we encourage you to look for those connections, to consider how the events and ideas of the early republic still resonate in the 21st century. It's an exploration that can deepen your understanding not just of the past, but also the present and the future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.